Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? It's been probably at least 4 months since I've recorded another a technology video, and that is embarrassing because, for one, these videos are not very hard to record, and I've just been way too lazy to make a video, which is just stupid considering how easy this is. Anyway, this is my Google Pixel Fold, which I have been using for the past 4 months, basically since I recorded the last video. We're going to talk about what I like, what I don't, and from me being an iPhone user, this is an interesting experience because obviously it's an Android phone. So, using Android accessories coming from an iPhone guy, what do I like, what do I don't? Let's talk about it. Now, been using this thing has actually been an eye-opener for me as far as phones, because I've always been an iPhone person. I've never really looked at Androids, but when I started seeing all the foldables coming out, like the Samsung Galaxy Z Folds, I have been intrigued because I've always wanted a tablet, but I could never justify it because I would just always grab my phone instead. Well, why not have both devices in one? So that was a huge selling point for me on this. And when these things finally got under 800 bucks, I'm like, I might as well jump on it because these were 1,800 bucks new just 2 years ago, and now they're way less than half that. So this is a 512 gig model. I think I got it for, I'm going to check, I think it was $730 with tax. Yeah, $710, so it was actually a little bit less than I thought, but for a 512 gig flagship phone, that is cheap, and considering you're getting 2 screens, a decent array of cameras, good battery life, I will talk about that in a second, because it's a little bit controversial on whether the battery life on this phone is good or not. In my experience, it actually has been, but we'll get back to that in a second. This is actually a surprisingly good deal if you're looking for a foldable. I would actually way have this over any Samsung foldable, because for one, I prefer Google Android, like the stock Android experience that Google phones provide much more than the Galaxies. If you're looking for a used foldable, I don't see any way you could go wrong with this. Obviously, there is some issues with it. Tensor is it's a little sketchy, but overall, I really like this phone, and I really don't see myself moving back to an iPhone or really any other candy bar style phone after I'm done with this device. One thing people have asked me about is, will this phone break? 4 months, well, to be fair, the device is more than 4 months old, but I've only had it for about that long. This thing has seen some falls. It fell probably halfway down a set of grandstands, and it did survive, and it was wearing this extremely thin case, which is a later case, and I really am a fan of this case because it makes it the same thickness as a normal bar phone, yet it just provides that little bit of protection that I just need to feel comfortable using it. I don't understand how people rock phones with no cases on them, period. That's just a little bit sketchy. And then I wanted to talk about the cameras. The first thing is, listen to this. I don't know if you guys can hear that. That is a obnoxious rattle, and I can hear it constantly. Whenever I just tilt my phone forward and back, you can hear it. It's really annoying, and I know exactly what it is. Because if I open the camera app and go to the telephoto lens, it's almost gone. If you shake it really hard, it'll come back, but most of it is gone. It is the optical stabilization. The problem with that is obnoxiously loud, and it really makes this thing feel like a really cheap and budget device versus what it's intended to be. For 1,800 bucks new, this would be really, really, really hard to justify. But for 700 bucks, I can see it. Speaking of the camera quality, you're probably wondering, hey, why aren't you recording this on this phone? And that's because the video quality low-key kind of sucks. For one, when you zoom in, it is not consistent at all. And also, changing between lenses, there is a massive lag and delay. So that makes for a really janky video recording experience. But the main issue is it overheats constantly when you're recording. Not even 4K video, just recording video in general. This thing will overheat in 5 minutes. That's all it takes. I was literally at a marching show for marching band, pulled out this phone, started recording. I think it was like almost barely 4 minutes in, it said video recording reduced due to high temperature. Recording quality reduced due to high temperature. That is just unacceptable coming from an iPhone, because iPhones literally never overheat when recording. They stay consistent and they look great. That's why I record on this iPhone still and not on this. I will say though, the pictures are acceptable. I will live with them because I love the phone so much that I can deal with the somewhat mediocre cameras. Now, one thing that genuinely has surprised me is battery life. So when we open up and go to battery, I'm at 73% right now. Now, to be honest, I have been on Wi-Fi the whole day, but I've only used a quarter of the battery and I'm almost to 3 hours of runtime. That's a 12-hour phone. I've been pretty much using the inner screen the whole time. So on Wi-Fi, this battery is phenomenal. Now, when you switch to cellular, then it becomes quite the opposite. It depends on if you have good strength or not and if you're on 5G, but typically I'm getting closer to 4.5 to 5 hours, which, to be fair, when I am on cellular, I'm not super heavy on my devices usually, but that's not great. And that has to do with the Tensor G2 chip not having the greatest modem and processing efficiency, you'd say. So, but on Wi-Fi, the battery life is phenomenal. The foldable screen, just having a massive screen, makes up for so much of the little nuances that I experience. Because if you just pull up any video, let's pull up this Jerry Rig Everything compilation I was watching earlier. Just having this big of a screen with you everywhere you go is so nice. And the speakers,
Samsung has so much adhesive behind them, it takes a high-powered heat gun or industrial hot plate to remove them.
The speakers actually are decent. This is by far the best sounding phone speakers I've ever experienced. So that actually makes watching YouTube videos or listening to music through the speakers actually bearable and actually something that you might want to do versus other phones. I will say iPhones typically do have pretty good speakers, but I've heard plenty of Android phones in stores that have just crappy speakers. This has probably the best speakers I've ever experienced. Speaking of unlock with pin or fingerprint, the fingerprint scanner can be kind of hit or miss. Let's see it. Let's say if I can open it again. Okay, that time it worked. I don't know if that finger is registered, but sometimes, say if my hand is really oily, oftentimes it'll just fail to recognize it. Obviously, it's gonna work all the time when I'm doing it on camera. It's not doing it because I'm recording. But every time I try to log in and I've touched something oily with my hands, maybe just some you have something, you're eating some potato chips or something and then your hands are just that slight bit greasy, it just won't read it. And that's kind of a bummer because iPhones have fantastic face unlock, so you never need a fingerprint scanner. This has face unlock, it's garbage and I don't use it. That's why I rely on the fingerprint scanner, which is mostly good. And I do like that it actually is on the power button and not under the screen like other Pixels. I much prefer the power button thing because you're already pressing the power button to turn the device on anyway. That's much better than other Pixels. This hinge never opens fully flat. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a significant bow in there. Obviously, I can force it a little bit and make it flat, and then it will stay that way, but when you close it and open it again, it just goes back to that slight angle, which honestly has not been a problem, and I have gotten used to the crease. I still notice it occasionally, but it's not really a huge issue. What is a huge issue is watching this in direct sunlight. This screen is so reflective, which means the brightness is basically 0 in direct sunlight, which is a problem. But all foldables and phones in general typically have that issue, so I'm not too worried about it. Speaking of screens, the always on display, I much prefer it over what Apple does because the font is small, which saves battery life, and you don't have, obviously Apple made it to where you can turn off the wallpaper, but I just like the thinner aesthetic of the clock. And it gives you your little notifications here. It just makes it so it's like it was designed correctly. And obviously Android has had this feature far before Apple has, but still, even the Apple way is not what I prefer. USB-C. This is the reason I got USB-C AirPods even though I still had a lightning powered iPhone. I got USB-C because I figured, well, I'm probably going to upgrade to something that has USB-C, so I wanted to future-proof it. And I'm glad that I did, because within 1 month of getting these, I upgraded to this, and that makes it so much easier because it's a 1 charging cable that I need on my nightstand and not 2, so that makes it a lot nicer to have. And I can charge my MacBook, this and these, with the same charger. The only thing I can't is the watch, but obviously that won't work because it has to be waterproof. That is really nice. And speaking of, compared to other foldables, the Pixel's the aspect ratio of the front screen is so much better. The wider aspect ratio makes it to where you can actually type in a reasonable way on the front. The quick, brown, fox jumped over. I mean, obviously I'm not great at typing, but on a keyboard, but you see, a Z Fold, this would be way more difficult. And if you need an even bigger keyboard, just open it up. The quick, brown, fox jumped over the lazy dog. See, that's really nice. Typing out emails on this much larger keyboard is so much better. Now I want to talk software. That's the thing. The main thing with this phone is it's Android. And as I said before, I'm an iPhone guy, or at least used to be. Now that I've been using this, I'm not anymore, but I have some nitpicks. For one, there's this really annoying thing that it does sometimes. It will start ringing even though I'm not receiving a phone call. It's the weirdest thing. It's happened several times in school, and that is the most embarrassing thing, and it does it even on silent with the ringer off, so that's technically the same thing. Volume's off, it's on silent, do not disturb is on, it still does it. The only way that I've found that fixes it is if you do a restart, it won't happen for about a week, and then it'll come back. Side note, the Google ringtones are really goofy. I don't like them, but... See what I'm talking about? Goofy ringtones. But it's not an alarm, because basically what would happen, phone's off, nothing's happened, start ringing, turn it on, by the time I turn on the screen, the instant I press any button on the phone, it immediately stops, and there's no missed calls or anything. It's just the strangest behavior that I can't pinpoint what's happening, and it's really odd. Also, not specific to this phone, but just going from Apple Maps to Google Maps. Google Maps is still terrible. I know Apple Maps is bad, but Google Maps isn't worse, but it's not great either. It is better in most respects than Apple Maps, but it's still pretty trash. Yesterday, we drove to Dallas, took my Polestar 2, has built-in Google Maps, and it's great until you get to an urban area, and then it just has a seizure and doesn't know what the heck to do. It took me in a circle 3 times, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna get on the 635 and leave. And it tried to reroute me several times, and I'm like, no, I know where I'm going. I'm just gonna take the 635 to the 175. And I went that way, it was fine, that's the way I normally go. But the car would just, the reason why I'm talking about the car is because it's Google Maps. This is Google Maps, and because it's Android, that kind of applies to the whole thing. So Google Maps is still garbage. And that goes for pretty much every navigation app there is. Waze, Apple Maps, Google Maps, anything else you can think of, it's all trash. Speaking of things that are trash, Gemini sucks. Okay, here's a thing I always try to do. Turn off the lights. Okay, instantly, lights go off. Turn on the lights. They instantly come back on. Gemini cannot control anything on the device. It seems, at least that's how it feels. I've asked Gemini several times to turn the lights on or off, and it doesn't do anything. It just is like, I don't know what the lights are. I can't find it. I'm like, okay, I just was like, okay, Google. I Googled how to turn off Gemini. Okay, turn it off, tried it. Instantly my lights would turn on and off with no thing. So Gemini sucks. I don't use it. I use just plain old Google Assistant. Yes, I know it's dumber, but for what I use it for, it makes more sense. And these things do some weird things. For one, when you connect these to an Android phone, it's fine until you connect it to an Apple device. When you do that, sometimes when you pick up AirPods, they will just start yelling. And not like yelling like, ah, but like just beeping for no apparent reason. They just throw a fit when they're not connected to an Apple device. And I don't understand that. That's just really strange. It sounds like I'm complaining a lot, but I really do like this device to use as just the device itself. But when you start adding in other things like MacBook, like that I'm reading my bullet points off of, AirPods, iPhone, Apple Watch, which I have a Series 9 that I had before this Pixel Watch. The Series 9 is a way better watch, but I can't use it. Like not having AirDrop and not having all the Apple features with my friends, aka iMessage, although iOS 18 with RCS has mostly negated that problem. There is still some little things like, I believe you can only send a video that is so long. I think there's a limit on the length, so that is still kind of an issue, but most of the issues have been fixed through RCS. But anyway, no AirDrop, no iMessage, no, but other than that, the software, other than the bugginess that I mentioned before, has been actually pretty nice because you can do a lot more with it, like putting launchers and running emulators and stuff on it. So it actually has been really nice to play around with. Emulating games on this is actually surprisingly interesting because, and it's basically just a DS. Like, you can play Mario Kart DS and Mario 64 DS if you just get the ROM, and it feels as close to the original hardware as possible while not being the original hardware, if that makes sense. This phone can get fairly warm, and using cellular data just in general, if you're watching a video on cellular data, it gets fairly warm to the point where it's like, okay, maybe it shouldn't be getting this warm over nothing. iPhones do get warm when playing games, but usually not when running on cellular, and that's just another thing with Tensor G2 is that it has plenty of power, for my use case anyway, but it just doesn't handle long period extended loads very well, if that makes sense. Like playing a game for like an hour, it will start to slow down pretty noticeably. It's hit or miss because Samsung's actual hardware is way better than this, but the software on the Pixel, I just like the simplicity of the software, and I don't really like One UI because Samsung's phones are just so bloated with garbage on them, and that's what I really liked about this Pixel, and the wider but shorter aspect ratio, which they did change with the 9 Pro Fold. They made it taller, not wider, so which is good. They kept the width, but they made it too tall, and I just like the passport style thing. And also when you open it, it opens into a landscape orientation, which is way better than opening up into a portrait orientation, like basically every other foldable. I can take the case off and show you what it looks like underneath, because I have the obsidian model and not the porcelain or whatever. There you go. That's what it looks like without the case. I'm not going to take this front thing off because it's stuck on there with double-sided tape, so it doesn't move around. The case I had initially purchased for this phone was a D-brand grip case, and just by looking at it, you can see that it is incredibly bulky. That's why I quit using it. Like, just look at how thick it is, and the spine protection thing would often start clicking, and it just felt really flimsy. And this kickstand, it was also just kind of cheap feeling, and this was like a $60 or $80 case. It was not cheap, but I don't know. If I ever need a rugged case, I can slap this on and not use the later case, but just look at like the size difference. It is so much bigger in every way, like thickness as well. Like, it's currently falling apart because it's not on a phone, but there you go. You can see the thickness difference. Like, it's almost double. That has been my opinions on using the Google Pixel Fold used that I bought for 4 months ago, sorry. $700, good deal. $1,800, hell no. I don't know how they thought they could get away with that. Well, granted, that's what foldables are priced at, but they really shouldn't be priced like that. They should be maybe $400 more than a regular iPhone, regular slab style phone. Will I continue to use this? The answer, yes. I love using this phone. I really wish that some of the little niggles wouldn't exist, because then the biggest one is that rattle. That just is really concerning. I don't like it because it makes it feel really cheap. Anyway, that's my 4 months update of a used Google Pixel Fold. Should you buy it? It depends. Do you want a foldable? Then obviously it's a great value option for that. If you don't, then I would say there's a little bit too much compromise in the processor and the cameras to justify it. But if you really, really want that fold, then go right ahead and buy the Pixel Fold. That's it. That'll be it for this video. See y'all in the next one. Bye.